Welcome to 247 Real Talk. I'm your host, Julian Perry. It's a pleasure to be here with you once again for another week. Hope you had a great week since we last spoke. And on this episode, I'm going to chat a little bit about AI. A lot of people have been interacting with me and they've opened up that discussion. I think the time is right since we seem to be on the cusp of something big in AI that will change our lives. Not sure for bad, better, or worse. So sit back, relax, grab whatever it is you need to do, and I'll be right back. So, welcome back to 247 Real Talk Podcast. Again, my name is Julian Perry. It's a pleasure to be here with you for another episode. I seem to be having a bit of technical difficulty here with the board. Okay. So, here we are another week, another topic. As I often tell you, I usually have several topics prepared. I kind of discuss off the top of my head. I don't like to prepare the actual narrative because it needs, my conversation with you needs to be a real conversation, like real time. This week, I had several things I was thinking about, talking about, but people kept bringing up AI. And as I delved into it a little bit and kind of looked at some of the things I read online, it seemed that it was important for us to have this conversation, at least the first conversation now. Now, I'm a tech guy. I'm a tech nerd. I write reviews of gadgets for online magazine. And everything about my home, everything about this studio space that I'm recording, you can't see the entire space, and I'm glad you can't because it's a mess. One, because there's always so many gadgets in here for review that I keep recycling or cycling through. And two, because I'm doing some changes to the studio. So before we get into AI conversation, let me tell you about some of the changes you may see soon. For those of you who look at the YouTube version, you may see something sticking up in front of me soon, a touchscreen monitor. And one of the reasons I may implement that is because when I'm having discussions about real time and in real time about real issues, real time issues, I kind of like to go through the list of what people are engaged with right now so that we can have current conversations about the challenges we currently have. There's a lot of history we can talk about. There's a lot of things that happened in the past. And I do that, as you know. But I also want to talk about present stuff, things that we're tackling each and every day. A lot of times, some of the stuff may not be relevant to, or some of the topics may not be 100% relevant to many of you across the country because, for instance, I want to record an episode about New York and crime, and that would be very specific to New York in terms of any statistics and any examples I use, but I think it will relate to the rest of the country because I think crime is up across the United States. So now, as I said, in the weeks coming by, depending on what I'll do, and I'll tell you what I'm doing. So for those of you looking at the YouTube version, you'll understand what you're seeing. Nevertheless, let's get back to AI. I know that, or let me do a little technology background in terms of where the world is going. I remember watching many years ago, I was a kid, I believe, because it had to be that long, that Bruce Willis, I think the movie was Fifth Element, possibly. And I don't usually watch those types of sci-fi movies, but in that movie, I believe, if I remember correctly, and if I'm wrong, please do send me an email, and let me know that I my memory is lacking in where this is concerned. But I remember in Fifth Element they were flying cars, and the cars kind of were going. It was crazy in the movie. They were flying at different levels. Your taxi would pull up to your apartment, whatever story you were in the sky, fifth floor, sixth floor, whatever. You jump in, and that's how they were running. And about a week and a half ago, some company in California got approval for its first flying car. Now, back then when I saw that movie, it was purely science fiction. There is no way I ever thought at that time that there would be something like a flying car. And, simple things like that as a tech guy, kind of get me, involved, right? I kind of almost lose sleep over it because it's such a challenge in my mind. And I'm thinking, well, what if something goes wrong with the car while it's flying? Especially if the idea is to eventually have hundreds of thousands of these things flying around like Fifth Element. They obviously fly in lanes. I guess that's what they would do. So, how do you deal with accidents and all these things, that probably should not be in my mind. As a tech guy, they were there. So when people started asking me about AI, I started thinking of all the great things AI can do, all the things that can automate our lives to a certain extent. And understand me, I'm an automation type of guy. My dream is eventually to have an AI system that I can have do multiple tasks, not based on the current systems we get with Amazon and Apple and those things, but something that I could program on my own. You ever see those movies where they come in and they say something like, good morning, whatever, and the systems light up and they speak to you and you can tell them to carry out different tasks. You can tell them to order different things. I mean, you can do that now with Amazon, right? But I'm talking about, you can order with Amazon just by talking to the device. I don't want to call the name of the device, as you all know, it's popular, but I have one in my studio here, and if I call the name, my phone and everything else will, react. So, to me, that if you automate it in that way, to me personally, that's a good thing for my life. Now, I understand the negatives that people have been talking about for a long time. Like, once you start going in that direction, you do start taking jobs from people. And we've already done that in many industries in so many ways. If you think about it, if you ever watch the Discovery Channel or one of those other channels and watch, for instance, there's shows where you look at how a car is built, these robotic arms and these AI systems that are integrated with the robotic arms, and they can do all the hard work that years ago a mechanic with a power tool or even a hand wrench would perform. And so I can see many great uses for it, but that's not really the core of this conversation. Because as I started to research what others were thinking and saying about it, I started to see the real bad parts of it, right? And I started to read up more about the dangers of it and the fact that tech companies are so money hungry and in such a rivalry as to who gets further along in the AI that they're willing to cut corners to not only boost their bottom line, but to say, I got there first, which usually translates into money if you do it right. I'm going to look at my phone here because I remember reading something this evening. Oh, here it is. And I'm not sure whose. It's something called The Take. But it basically says, what would you do if you picked up the phone and heard the voice of a relative begging you for help while kidnappers held them at ransom? The problem is, if you have a relative who doesn't live close to you, you haven't spoken to in a while, or you can't reach immediately, what they're talking about here is the scam. It says here, in the United States alone, $2.6 billion were lost to imposter scams last year. $2.6 billion. We've heard about these scams where someone will call you and say, your grandson was, and they're picking the elderly, right? Your grandson just got locked up, he needs bail, or your grandson is being kidnapped, you need to transfer, how many $1,000 or whatever, Bitcoin or whatever it is, currency they use that's really hard to trace or untraceable to get the freedom of your child. And that's usually someone on the phone. But with AI now, they can actually replicate your relative's voice. Think about the danger now, right? It's like you hear me speaking right now. I'm in front of a camera. You in our current technology, you can at least say when you're looking at my YouTube channel, that's him in front of the camera. But what if we get to a point where I can somehow do a hologram of me and have the AI do the entire podcast, and you think that I'm speaking with you because this is not interactive right now, right? This is just me speaking and streaming to you. So what happens if I get to sit by and not do it anymore? Well, that's in that kind of sense, that's kind of cheating my supporters, right? Because I'm not even making the effort, nor is it me actually speaking to you. But then think about the scams. I mean, it is impossible if you're sleeping at 3:00 in the morning, your relative calls you, your close relative, and says, "I'm in trouble. This has happened to me, or I've been kidnapped, or whatever. Whatever happened, and I need this money now, and I need you to send it this way because the police can't find it. It has to be done this way." You listening to your relative's voice, and you're 100% sure this is your relative now because you know them. So you toss up all this money, and the next day you get a call to your relative like, "Hey, how you doing, Julian? Like, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." No, did the kidnappers lose you? What are you talking about? And you come to find you've been scammed. This is what is going on. Okay? And this is one of the many scams that they're using AI for. They're using AI for government services. They're using AI to replicate voices. And then understand something. AI doesn't stop at voices. What we found out is, and I think I saw them doing this on, is it Instagram or Facebook? I don't want to, allegedly, because I don't remember what I was looking at, but someone showed me this new AI thing where they can take your face and do the AI and replicate your face. So technically, you could be in 2, 3, 4, 5, or you could present yourself as being in 2, 3, 4, or 5 places at the same time. Remember, we're living in a virtual world. I have not been to an in-person meeting since before March 2020. That was when I first went to work from home because of COVID. And here we are in 2023, mid-2023, and I still have not been in an in-person meeting. Why? Because everything is virtual. And even though we say COVID for the most part is over, no one wants to go back to in-person meetings. We've learned about the convenience of, at least I sit in my office. It's pretty hot in my studio. I'm sorry if I'm sweating, and for those who look at me on YouTube, and I don't want to turn on the AC because I just installed a new AC. It's kind of noisy and it might affect you hearing what I'm saying. So this episode may be quite short because it's pretty hot in here and I have to find a solution. Nevertheless, what I'm saying is we never went back to in-person meetings. The convenience of me sitting in my office with my door closed. I don't open my door anymore. Before, when I went to work before 2020, my office door would be open. People would say hello, walk by, walk in. Now my door stays closed. Not locked, but closed. And all my meetings are virtual. And we find out that, we can be walking on the street and having a meeting. We can leave work early because we have to do something, and someone says, "Well, I need you to attend the meeting." We can still do it. We can do them. I've done meetings from while I'm on the railroad going home. So nobody wants to go back, right? Because in person now seems like for many reasons. One, because of lack of convenience. Two, because I think there's still that fear of what's the next pandemic, and are we going to go back to what we were doing and find ourselves in the same predicament, catching the same or spreading the same, whatever virus in the same way, and ultimately losing lives at the same rate because we repeated history. So the virtual world means that we're seeing people through a lens and we're speaking through, through mics like I'm speaking to you. So if I had the ability to use AI in Zoom, in Microsoft Teams or whatever, and present myself there and have the AI, something like maybe Chat GPT, right? Create answers for me that if I feed it enough information, it can probably get me through certain meetings. Then I can be doing something else while this AI is presenting itself as me and then interacting with you, and you think it's me. Think of the chaos we can solve, we can cause. Many people are raising the alarm about AI because the fact is that as we create these artificial intelligence environments, and I don't understand all the details about it, even as a tech guy, but as I understand it, these things can become learning mechanisms, and eventually we become slave to these systems, and these systems actually run us. And when you have, you ever watch that movie? There was another AI movie I watched where I don't remember the name of it, but where AI was in charge of all the weapon systems, or it took over the weapon systems, and they started a world war. And there's one guy in the computer trying to beat it to stop it from create the end of the earth. Well, again, that was a movie like Fifth Element, but from what we're hearing about AI and about what the alarms that people are sounding and the information that they're sharing suggests that that's not a ridiculous concept, that we can eventually be controlled because we would have lost control of the very systems we created. And they would have learned to the point where they can react to us. And because they are not real, they can react faster than we can act as human beings. So they not only can predict our next moves, but if we try to do something to stop them, the systems can likely figure us out before we can move fast enough to carry out or execute our plans. Now, again, that may sound like science fiction, but I'm beginning to understand it's not. AI is dangerous if it's not done in a really methodical and really thought out way, and only used in certain industries towards certain tasks. But you have to understand, we are driven by a world of people who are driven by greed. And greed means as the more power. Power is what they're looking for. Power, money, green, wealth, to live better than everyone else. And once they decide to do this, and they understand the powers of AI, you can put it into the hands of someone who is well-meaning and get the greatest out of it, or it can fall into the hands of someone who right now is the arms dealer or the murderer or whatever, and serial killer, whatever you want to call it, or someone who just does things, is involved in weapons trades, whatever it is. But you can put it in the hands of the wrong person and give them power that you can't control. As a techie guy and looking at the good of it, I can't wait to see the good it will do in the future. I can't wait to see systems that possibly you can go to the doctor at the early stages of something, and enough AI systems can predict the progression of whatever it is whatever it is that has been initiated in your body, and therefore give a plan for what do I want to say, curing or slowing down the progress, or preserving your life for a longer time, because it already sees what current medicine may take a long time to see or predict. Think about, again, the medical field. Think about so many people every single day we're hearing. Almost all of us know someone who died of cancer. In the last 3 weeks, I think I know of 2 people who died and were buried from cancer. It was a hard time for me. I think I spoke about it on my last podcast. Think about you going to the doctor, they do the blood work, they use AI and AI has this, can run these algorithms that would take us time. Sometimes you go to the doctor and the doctor, you do a test and they tell you, well, we'll get the results in 2 weeks. No, AI does it right there and then. AI catches things, or can orchestrate multiple tests that humans can't do on their own right now without assistance, and help to save your life and to save you pain and suffering. I believe the systems can get that far. I believe the systems can do enough to predict disaster ahead and help us to implement preventative maintenance to avoid those disasters. But AI can also be a disaster by itself, like I said. And these are things that we need to think about now. I think when many of you listen to this episode, some of you will become immediately attached to what I'm saying, and some of you will detach. Because for those of my listeners who are still far outside the technology world, who find the cell phone to be just enough on a challenge, what I'm saying may seem quite foreign. But for those who have recognized what technology has done, is doing, and where it can go, we will begin to understand that we're stepping into a new era. We're stepping into a new technology that is not just a regular progression of what we've been doing. It's one that can actually threaten human lives, that can actually cause misery, damage, hurt, many things. Just like that movie where the AI was able to make another country think they were being attacked and make them retaliate with their nuclear weapons. These things are not impossible, or they're no longer mythical. So in the midst of everything else we have to worry about, and I know the last few episodes I talked about a lot of things, student loans and inflation and crime and the lack of value for human life. Now we've got to worry about technology adding a layer of complexity to our lives. I tell you this at an early stage because I don't want to come back in an episode a year from now or 2 years from now and tell you I told you so. This may not be the typical everyday dynamic that you're used to me talking about, but I felt it was important enough to have this conversation. Our own livelihood could become, or could be put into jeopardy by the very thing that we are working and companies are working so hard to create. I don't know if any of you saw that that Apple stock, I think the value hit like how many trillion, the first ever in history. And there's this new VR lens or glasses that are headset that put them over the top. And I watched a demo of it, and where the guy was sitting there. Now picture this, and those of you who are hearing the audio version may not be able to picture it as well, but he had the headset on. He put his hands in front of the headset. He can't see his hands, but he's scrolling through the internet. And by simply moving his fingers in front of the headset, he was actually scrolling up and down, doing all the commands you would do with a mouse, next screen, just by gestures with his hands in front of the headset. I found that to be quite remarkable. And one of those headsets, I think, is like $3,500. That's because it's early technology. But imagine what's coming next. For a person like me who is a techie, I pray to God that I get a long, healthy life so I can see some of the amazing things. But I also understand the responsibilities that come with it. I also understand that we as human beings and we as consumers have to hold those technology companies and those people who are producing these products to a certain scrutiny and to a certain level of controls. We're entering a phase of human life that was, was mythical or futuristic a few decades ago when we watched those movies and we called them sci-fi. It's no longer sci-fi, it's now real-fi. So this was just a conversation in between all the serious stuff I usually talk about, but this is still serious in a different way. I'd like you to think about it. I'd like you to go and Google it and take a look at AI, ChatGPT, and all these other artificial intelligence systems that people are pushing now. I'd like to have a clear understanding of what they're talking about and what's to come. I'd like you to look for those who are sounding the warning bell and talking about what these things can actually do and how we can become victims to AI, and AI can actually become, for the first time in our lives, the top of the food chain, even over human beings. Hope you enjoyed this little, sidebar to what is normally much more serious conversations in terms of our everyday lives. But it's one that's also serious. Just gives you a little break from the crime and the drama to think about something different, but something just as important. As always, it's been my pleasure to have this conversation with you this week. I really hope that you have a great week ahead, a positive one. I really hope that many of you have been listening to my episodes and have been thinking of ways to get involved and to help change. I thank you for those who have been reaching out to me, emailing me, texting me, WhatsApp me, those who know my contacts in that manner. Remember that my email address is podcast@247realtalk.net. That's podcast@247realtalk.net. If you go to the YouTube channel or you go to any podcast app, you can hear the audio version. YouTube, you can see the video version. For those who go to the audio version, you'll see links to my website where you can hear all the episodes. For those of you who are on the YouTube channel, I thank you for your support as well. Please share the podcast. Please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. I'm trying to get to a place where I can not only provide more, do more, share more, create a show for you that has much more to offer. I have a lot of ideas of things that can bring real informative news and briefings to you, and things that will empower your lives and give you positive results in many fields: medical, mental health, social, socioeconomic. So please subscribe and share the podcast. Invite others to subscribe. You supporting me helps me to support you. Again, I'm thankful. I'm grateful for all of you who continue to support me. And as I see the channel growing, continue to share and get others engaged. Do have a great week ahead. Enjoy, be safe. And until the next time, take care of yourselves and each other.